Hey everybody! So today's video, it's going to be a bit of a longer one because I've got a lot of moving parts to show you, but today I want to talk about how to track your career goals and not just actually setting goals, but actually creating a process for checking how well you're following up with them and making progress on them, giving you a way to quickly log specific things. So when it comes time for promotion or just you regularly want to see, am I making progress in this? You don't have to say, yeah, sure, I'm learning JavaScript. You can point to specific things that show examples of how you've been doing that. And so to do that, I use a couple of tools. I use Google Sheets, I use Pixybrix, of course, and Trello. Who's surprised by that? So these three things, and in today's tutorial, it's, like I said, going to be a bit of my longer content, but we're going to sit down and we're going to go through how I built this process and how you can do it as well. So I'm also including a link to a text-based post about this if you'd prefer to kind of follow along there. So just check for that in the description. Okay, so to get started, first, like I said, we're going to start with this spreadsheet. I'm going to include a link to this template, and you can literally just go here, click File, make a copy, make it your own, call it whatever you want. But the way this works is this first tab over here, it's called Goals, and it's basically just a bunch of goals. It's exactly what it sounds like. So to give you very tangible examples, I showed you this is basically exactly what mine looks like. And the way it works is this column F and G are the only ones you'll be changing. But this kind of, it's just different categories of tasks. So you could call these all categories of goals. So like it could be something like learn JavaScript. It could be like, improve teamwork or whatever your category is. And then column F is going to be a bit more like description about it. And so it's going to be like, what does that actually mean? Like, what is that? What do I mean by learn JavaScript? Like building an app, like what does that mean? And then in column G, we're going to take that and get even more specific. So you want something quantifiable here. And if you've ever heard of the terminology of SMART goals, like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based, you really want to try to come up with some things like that. And so you can see how I took, here's a generic sort of goal of like improving my scope and being a fully proficient programmer. What does that mean? And I created a specific action item from that of 80% of the time I can solve an issue on my own or come up with my own solution. Different sort of things like that. So that's what you're going to be looking for. And here is building out this sheet to be exactly that. You want to have these sort of categories of action items. So that's the first thing you need to do. Edit this goals tab. Next, you're going to see this middle tab. It's called Relevant Tasks Don't Edit. Guess what? You don't edit it. And so the way that it's going to work, I'm actually going to clear that out. The way it's going to work is, before I do, I'll show you what this looks like, is you're going to use Pixybrix to do all of this, so you should never need to actually update this tab. But if you want to, you can, but it's important not to change the headers here, because what this is this is effectively your log. And we're going to create a trigger where you can basically create a row in this that shows, hey, here's something that I did, and you're going to say which goal it relates to, and then any additional notes about it will include a link to it and the date it happened on. So like I said, it needs to start blank, but what we'll do here is on this third tab, the dashboard. This is where you basically want to take your goals and specific action items and you want to list them here. So notice I've got things like, solving a problem on my own, leading a launch of a new feature, tackling new ground, proactive debugging. You'll notice there's like some of the shortened versions of those titles over here, and that's because what I'm going to do is I want to see how many things I log relate to those things. And all you need to change is this column right here. Swap this in with whatever you had in that action column over here. And again, it can be shortened names. It doesn't really matter what you call it. At this point, this will need to match something we set up in Pixybrix, but it doesn't matter at this point yet what you call these. And don't edit these unless you know what you're doing and or want to, but pretty much what these are is these are cells that reference, functions inside these cells that say, they go look over in that other tab and say, hey, count how many of the goals turned up over here. So right now everything's 0 because there's nothing there. But if you notice, when over here, when I had some stuff in there, notice these are what we have for related goals. So it's going to show 1 on that and 1 on that. So that is what that is. And again, you shouldn't need to edit anything in there. Let me fix that again here. Whoop. You shouldn't need to edit anything in this tab. And you shouldn't need to edit any of these cells either. Just really what you're doing is kind of filling out through this worksheet with your own sort of goals and things you want to prioritize, and then taking your goals and putting them here. All right, so you got that. Done with the spreadsheet. Check one. Pat yourself on the back. Next thing you're going to want is you're going to want to add Pixybrix. Install it if you haven't already. Make sure you've got the Chrome extension. And then that's where we're going to build the magic. So trying to keep this doc up to make sure I keep going as we go along. We've got the dashboard set up. Here's the formula. And so yeah, so here's how we're going to use Pixybrix. So first of all, we're going to open our page editor, hit inspector, go to Pixybrix, and we want to add a sidebar panel. So I've already got these pre-built, so I'm going to show you the config and what that looks like. But if you're just starting out, you're going to click that add button and click sidebar panel. But this is what it's going to look like. So it's going to create that first brick here that says sidebar panel. You can call it whatever you want. I call it achievements panel. This is all kind of semantics at this point. Heading, I called it goals. You can call it whatever you want, but basically what we're building is this visual sidebar, and we'll figure out the form and actually logging achievements after this, but we're building this sidebar to be able to visualize, you know, something that's encouraging here. So for us, I'm visualizing that dashboard that I just showed you in the spreadsheet. So that way, you know, whenever I want to see my progress, I can just open this sidebar and see, oh, cool. I'm doing great on tackling new ground, but haven't done anything in proactive debugging. Let me do something here. I need to improve team docs. Maybe that's what I should be working on next. And then below that, I show what the last task logged is. And this is I'll show you which parts you need to do it. It's up to you if you really care about this. It could be a little bit more work than it's worth if you're not really interested in seeing this, because I don't actually pull this from the spreadsheet, but I'll make sure as we're going through that I let you know which is what that relates to. If you're like, I don't want to add that, then you can just skip through those parts. So that's what we've got right there. Basically says what the task was, when it was completed, and that timestamp there. And then the last section I have is ready to grab a new task. And what this does is it actually looks at a Trello board that I have with a list called Elastic that has tasks in it that are obviously related to my full-time job tasks. And it just displays the card names and when they're due here with a link. So if I click that, it'll actually open up that card on Trello. And so just so you can see what this board actually looks like, this is my sort of life dashboard here. And I specifically have a list called Elastic. So if you are interested in tracking your tasks like I do and having something like this, you will need to create a Trello board. And yeah, you can set it up a myriad of different ways. If you want to follow along exactly with what I'm doing, you're just going to want to create some sort of board with the name Elastic as one of the lists and have any cards in there. And then you can pretty much copy and paste what I'm doing from here on out, and you should be able to see what I've got here. So now that we see what's in there, let's see how we actually display that all. So like I said, we start with, setting up sidebar panel, just default config here. No need to really change anything on this. Next, I'm going to ignore these two for just 1 second because we're going to do some work in them before we even really render things over here. So I'm going to skip for just a second. And because when you first create a sidebar panel, you already have this render document brick. So I want to talk about that for a second. So the way this works, if you've never used it before, it can be a little bit tricky. And the reason for that is it's basically nested elements. So you can see right up here, this is a container. And you can see that. Oops, sorry, here it is. You can see that because this text over here changes. So do you notice, watch as I'm clicking around, and you can see what the element is. Container. And then in here I've got a row. And then in here I've got a column. And then I've got a header in there. So did you see all the times that changed? So basically what you're doing is nesting elements in here. And whenever you want to add a new element, you just click the 3 dots of the parent that is above it and select what you want to add to it. So let's say I actually want something, down here below what I have with my Trello cards. I'm going to add these 3 dots at the container level and click row. And notice down here, it's added a new column. It's great. So now, it's added a new row and a column within it. And so then I can add within that column whatever I want, like text or whatever. And see, it shows up there. To actually edit these things in the render document, this sort of editor, you click on it and you'll see the editor turn up over here. So I'm always tempted to like start typing over here. That doesn't do it. But once you click it, you can go over here and edit this text. And if you know Bootstrap class names, you can apply them here. If you don't, you can use this sort of WYSIWYG thing to make it look like what you want and change the color and change the background. Or that looks terrible. But yeah, you get the gist. So I'm actually going to delete that whole row because I don't really need anything with that. But I just wanted to help you get a little more familiar with what this looks like, because some of this is going to come down to how much you want to style it and how much you don't. The core parts of this are going to be bricks that display the information, but you can see within it, some of it's literally just simple text. So I added a row and it came with a column, and then I added a header within it, and I literally just called it Yay Progress. And then I added another row because I wanted to style that Google Sheets to show in there. And so I added another row, and then within it, I clicked, within the column, I clicked these 3 dots and I selected brick. And when I did that, it spit up something over here that said brick. And what that basically means is I want you to render something that is kind of a computed thing. Like, it's not a simple sort of like text element. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to hit this plus button here for add a brick. And when you do that, you're going to see all the different bricks you can add with Pixybrix. So I'm going to type in iframe, and you're going to see first one that shows up here. It literally shows an iframe, and that's all I want to do. If you've never embedded, or if you've never like seen Google Sheets before, you can embed them in iframes, and all you need to do is from your spreadsheet is go to File, and then I forget this every time, Share, Publish to Web, and then from there click Embed, and you can say if you want it to be the entire document, if you want it to be a specific tab, whichever one you want it to be, and then just hit publish. For me, I'm just most interested in the dashboard one because that's all I really wanted to share. So you can just hit publish, it'll ask if you're sure, and then it'll give you this whole link here. And really what you need from here is just the part source equals blah 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 all the way to the quotes there. So let's go back to Pixybrix here, and you can see here's that URL right here, and you just need to paste that in there. And the rest of this is just kind of styling semantics. So I like to have the width be 100%, which basically means it's going to take up that whole width of the side panel. And then I also like to set the height. I played around with this number a little bit because I didn't want it to take up too much space in my side panel because I had other things I wanted to add. But I also wanted to make sure it showed all of the goals on here. And so that's exactly what I did. I played around with it, and for me, 300px was about the right option. You can play with yours a little bit more, and you'll see that's why I have this column shortened as it is instead of like all the way out right here, because I wanted it to actually fit a little bit better so we could see those things over here. So yeah, that is that, and that is exactly how it's going to show you the name of the sheet. It's going to show you the tab name, and then it's literally just going to, you know, iframe what's in there. And so that looks super nice, pretty simple. I think I might be able to change some of that. Like, I don't know if I can get rid of the published Google Sheets, but I'm wondering if like I change some of that, if that might clean it up a bit or not. But anyways, feel free to play with that if you want. And then that's how we've got that. And then the next we want to add is we want to show this last task logged. And so that's going to add another row in here. And, you know, add those 3 dots, add a row. And then within that column, I added a header. And I literally, you can see I just styled it kind of within here. Changed the color here, text info, font italic, blah, 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 blah. I think that just means it changed it to the info color. Yep, exactly. So that's what that did there. And then within that, I clicked those 3 bricks again, those 3 dots again, and selected brick. And then it came back over here to, you know, give me that other sort of section. And so what I'm doing in this section is I want to say, hey, go look for data in the Pixybrix database and show me what's there. And I can get into, the reason I do this is because if I were to go grab the task that's logged in the Google Sheet, it's just not as fast. It doesn't render as quickly. Also doesn't style the right sort of timestamp, I think. I can't even remember now why I did this the way I did it. I think it's because I was having some trouble with Pixybrix to actually get the most recent row. And you know what? You might be able to do this if you're better with, Google Sheets and Pixybrix than me. You might actually be able to figure out where, instead of this brick, you could just actually look up, get spreadsheet row, or what's it called? It's something with Google Sheets, but there's like a whole brick where you can look up Google Sheet row. Yeah. So usually what that brick is looking for is like a specific query, and I couldn't figure out how to make it say the most recent thing that was added. But if you can, feel free to go for it, and you can totally skip using Pixybrix as a database. But I actually found it pretty easy to, when I submit the form in my other extension, which we'll build in a minute, I just push that data to Pixybrix and I rewrite it every time. It's just basically one object. There's just one key. I call it most recent. And as you can see here, and I basically just rewrite that to that every time, and then I fetch it when we're loading this and get that data and display it. So the first brick you're going to want to add, it's literally the get data from Pixybrix database. And for key, call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter at this point. When you make the next extension and you actually go push that data to Pixybrix, you're going to want it to be whatever this is. I made it most recent. You can call it whatever you want. If you haven't created a database before, you're going to need to create one. Just open up and hit add new. It's literally as simple as like giving it a name and putting it with a team or group if you want. So I just called mine achievements. Again, call it literally whatever you want. If it's missing, you may want to change this at first so it just keeps going, because it's going to throw an error because there's nothing there yet, and there won't be anything until we fill out the form. So feel free to just put this as blank, and you may want to error later, but otherwise it'll like mess up the whole extension just because it doesn't find anything in the database, even though that's the expected behavior at this point. So feel free to play around with that. You could also just add this in later, totally up to you. So that's all you need there. And then the next thing you need to do is add a brick called render markdown. And this is exactly what it sounds like. You're basically just saying what markdown to render. So this is where I'm passing it some information we just got from Pixybrix. And if you've never referenced data from other bricks before, the way this works is you're literally just saying, hey, reference the output at transformed 5, which matches exactly what we get from get data from Pixybrix database. And then when it actually returns the data, it's going to be in a data object called .data. And so let me just actually show this here and you'll see what it looks like. But it's going to reference it in, you can see here now, this is what we actually got from Pixybrix. So the data we got, it's actually at transformed5.data. And then you see the two properties that we got with it are date and name. And so you can actually copy these and it shows you the exact path. And so just to show you, if you were now to paste that, it's going to show you that exact path I used here. So feel free to do that, or you can freestyle and type it on your own. Totally up to you. But yeah, feel free to put in whatever you want and in whatever format. And you can use Markdown. So I use this to make it italicized in between the dates. And so I'm literally just referencing the name of the task, saying completed on, and then the date that it was completed. And so that is all I do for that one. And then I add another row, and I add a header in here called ready to grab a new task. And then it gets a little interesting below that. So I wanted to, like I said, reference the tasks on my Trello board that relate to Elastic. And so what I did here is I added, added a new row. And within that row, there's obviously a column. Then within that column, I added a list. So, sorry, I'm trying to make that guy go away. There we go. Here's my column. And then within that, I click those three dots to add, where are you at, buddy? Add a list. And so here we go. So we've got my list right here. And basically what I'm doing is I'm going to pass it some data. And this is where I'll come back to this in a second, because this is where we're going to reference some work that happened before we even rendered the brick. I think I could probably technically do it down here. I'm going to be totally honest, I can't remember why I decided to do it up here, but we'll come back to that in a second. But basically, I'm saying, hey, this list, I'm going to pass you some Trello cards, and I'll tell you more about where we get that data in a second. We're going to call the element key list, and the item type is going to be a card. And so that's basically showing, just what we've got all here, and what that looks like. And then within that list, we've got the card. So you see the card element right here. And then basically you can give it any sort of heading you want. I just called mine Elastic Tasks. And then within it, you're going to click these 3 little buttons, and you're going to click brick again. And it's going to ask you, for a brick here. And that's where we're going to add a customized table. So you see, you might have seen it just popped up a second ago. Customized table. There you go. That displays a list of values. So that is basically what we want there. Let me go back to it 1 second just so you can see the full piece here. Yeah. So, and then it's going to spit everything out over here on this side. And, right, that's where we added the customized table. And so now what we're basically going to do is say, hey, remember that time in the list we gave you some data? I want you to go reference that list. And then I want you to take from that data, I want you to create a table, and each column is one of these properties, or basically one of these blocks in the object. So we've got keys and values. So you notice I've got tasks and due dates. So those are my 2 columns. Label, it's literally, it doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it poop. It really doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want here. The most important piece is property. And that's where you're going to say, hey, that thing up here, the data that I'm passing you that we just told you about in list, and then we decided to call it at list. What I need you to do with that is go parse that and look for something called .name. So more specifically, we are literally looking at, it's just what we get from Trello, which I'll show you those bricks again in a second, but we're going look at those cards look at what we get there, and then look at those cards, and for each card, look at .name. And I'll show you in a second, but this is exactly what we're getting from Trello. That sort of data about cards. So if you can return anything here, any of these fields that you see is something you could put in a table. You could put labels, positions, URL, all sorts of things. And so going back down here, I'm just going with name. And then you can add an href property, which basically means if I click on it, where does it go? And luckily, URL is also one of those properties. So that is how I'm able to make it where here's the name of the task, and if I click it, it goes right to that task in Trello. And then I don't have that. I don't have the dates linked for anything, so that's fine. An improvement for me at some point will probably be to clean these up and just return the first 10 here so I don't get the whole timestamp, but that another problem for another day. So that's exactly how we render it. But before we actually even can get that data, I added these 2 bricks to this achievement panel before the render document. So you just add it right up there. And the first one is Trello Get Cards. And what I'm doing with that is I'm saying, hey, I'm going to give you a board ID. Can you just return me an array of all, well, I think specifically it's an object, but can you return me all of the information about that Trello board? And if you've never found your Trello board ID before, it's super easy to do. All you need to do is go to any sort of Trello board, and all you need to do, that's a card, all you need to do is go to the end of the URL and put .json and hit enter. And then if you've never programmed before, you're going to be like, whoa, what I see here is very confusing and terrifying. And don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about most of what's on this page. You just need to see this first line where it says ID equals blah, blah, blah. You just want to copy that number, and that is your board ID. And hey, that's me. And that is what you're going to paste right in here. And it's basically, here's the board I want you to look at. And notice this is exactly what we get back from Trello. So basically it goes and looks at that board, and then it returns back all sorts of things about those cards. It returns the name of the card, it returns the short link, the URL, it returns the due dates, labels, if it's closed, if it's been completed, if it's not been completed, all sorts of things about it. And so that's all you need to configure on this brick. And then for this next brick, it gets a little hairy, but don't worry, I've already done all the math and stuff for you here and the programming. Me and the Pixybrix team helped me out with figuring out how this needs to look. And this should work for you, so I'm going to paste this, and it's actually in this blog post. Let me find it. Haven't published it just yet, but I'm about to. But this is exactly what you're going to copy and paste, and you're going to put it in here as your filter, because it's going to do all the math to say, hey, okay, that list of Trello cards that you just gave me everything from this board. Can you just give me the ones that are in a list called Elastic? Well, specifically in a list with the ID of Elastic, but we'll get to that. And so you're going to put that in your filter, and then for data, you're going to change this to object properties, and you're going to have your input, and that's just going to be whatever this output is from Trello Get Cards. By default, it's probably going to be Trello @transformed. Depending on, some of these other ones down here, it might look different for you. It might say transformed 1 or 2 or something. But just whatever that's called, make sure it references that there. And then last, you want list. And that's because in here, we're telling it to go look for cards where it says that card property, the list is that ID. And this is how I got the ID for that board. And let me actually bring up that last tab, because you'll do the exact same thing to get the board ID. To get the list ID. So remember this fun guy. So now, just going to search. I happen to know I have a list on here called generic. So I'm going to look for generic. And you see it came up here with name. Look for whatever is right before that. ID, this is your list ID. So notice it'll be in those same sort of brackets, and that's how you know. So you look for Elastic or whatever the heck your list name is. That's what you want to put right in here. You don't need any quotes or anything around it, literally just the number. And yeah, and you're done. At that point, you've basically, what we've said is, hey, Sidebar, open up and, create your own sort of panel here. Go get some Trello cards. Now go filter that data and just give me a shorter version of those Trello cards. And show me an iframe of this tab in my spreadsheet. And then go get data from the Pixybrix database and return what you see there in a line of text. And then remember those Trello cards I had you get? Can you organize them in a table for me? That's literally what we're doing here, and it sounds like a lot, and it is. It's really cool that we're able to do that, but again, you should be able to follow through this. Feel free to pause if you need to, or go, read through the steps in this tutorial to have the different pieces here and make sure you've got it all in place, but that's exactly what you should need to be doing here. So we're not done yet, though, because all we've built so far is the ability to render this panel, which is great, but we want to build a quick action for logging these sort of tasks, because I don't know about you, if I have to go to Trello, if I have to go to Google Sheets or whatever, I'm not going to remember to do it. So I need something to do it to make it super, super easy. So here's what I ended up building. Let's see. I used quick bar, so if I do command shortcut and I go to login achievement, pops open this sidebar with a form, and it says, what was the task? And this is a bad example, because if this was an actual web page, it would default this to the title of the web page, but I'm on a JSON element, so there's nothing there. So I can just call it whatever I want, record video. I can say which goal was it related to, and this is where we'll have a drop-down menu that, notice these all match exactly what we put in that spreadsheet over here. Oop. And I'll show you how we create that in a minute. Tackle new round, and I can add any notes here, and I hit log, and it sprays some confetti, and it takes me to this page over here, that the side panel that we just built. And you'll actually notice in my spreadsheet, hang on, let me bring up my spreadsheet, not my template. You'll notice it actually did create a whole row with that, including the name of the task, the goal is related with any notes, and also a link to the task and today's date. So now, let's go build this one. So to build this one, again, I'm just going to walk you through what I've already got built out, but what you would do is you're going to hit add quick bar, and that's going to bring you to right here. So it doesn't matter really what you call this extension name, doesn't really matter what you call the action title, that's what's going to pop up when you do this. So notice I have login achievement, that is this text here. And you don't really need to make any other changes on here. The next thing you want to add is the show sidebar brick, and this literally just pops open that sidebar and it tells it which one. I just called it log. That hasn't been defined before. That is the name of the form title, so I don't know that it even matters. You probably could leave this blank and it's fine, but we're basically just saying, hey, pop open that sidebar. Next, add the show modal or sidebar form brick, and the way that works is it's basically just a form. So you give it a title. Like I said, I gave it the same name as the panel that I told it to display. You add a field. Most important thing is you want to give it a name. I called mine task. The label, this is what people see. This is what goes above it in the form. You can actually preview it here on the side. You can add a field description if you want. I didn't need that and wanted, a cleaner form, so I left it out. Input type, you have tons of different options here. Single line text is what I chose for that. And then you can put in a default value, and this is what it's going to set it as, but you can change it obviously before you submit. I went ahead and used something called input.title, and that is because when you use the quick bar, it actually grabs context about the page you're on when you trigger that shortcut. And one of those things that it grabs with it is the title of the page, the URL, different sort of things like that. So it has different types, and if you actually had any text highlighted, it could grab that too. So I default to the title of the page because honestly, 99% of the time, I'm probably going to fill this out after I've just closed an issue or something, or I'm, visiting a URL that's related to the thing that I was working on. So maybe it's a Trello card or, whatever it is. So I want it to default to the title of that. And I also want it to log that URL. So you probably noticed in the sheet here that I have that section for link, and it will include the link to whatever page you are on when you log that. Maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. It literally took 2 seconds to add in, so I felt like I'd keep it. The next thing I did here, to add a new field, you just hit add new field, and it, adds it in here. Field 1, I actually don't really want that, so I'm going to remove that. But yeah, you just kind of click through. And then for the next one, I called it goal. Again, this is how you're going to reference the data from that. So honestly, name is the most important field here. Everything else is just kind of aesthetics. And then, I use drop down, and this is where what you set up here, you can add as many items as you want, but it needs to match exactly what you have in here. And the reason for that is this is going to count, this function right here, it counts how many times this phrase is mentioned in this column over here. So if you so much as have one letter off, let's say you say come up with my own solutions instead of coming up with, Pixybrix is going to log this action over here as come up with, and Google will never see this because this exact phrase is not ever used. So if you come across any bugs while you're doing this and you're like, wait a minute, I don't understand, I'm definitely have tasks in here, why is this at 0? You probably have something spelled incorrectly there. So feel free to comment on this video, comment on this tutorial, let me know if you need any help with that, if you're having any struggles there, and I'm happy to help you try to debug whatever's going on there. But my money's on that's probably your issue if you're having an issue with that. And then any notes you want to add, I just created a paragraph text where I could put anything else I wanted in there. I called the name of that notes. So my 3 fields are task, goal, and notes, and you'll see me reference those in a second. The most important thing to notice on this form, you need to configure this. Below the field options is location. Make sure it's set to sidebar. By default, it'll be modal, which means it's going to pop up in the middle of the screen. We want it to pop up on the sidebar just so it's kind of out of the way and you can still see what you're working on without modal being in the way. So make sure it's set to sidebar. Next, we're going to add the parse date brick, which if you've never used this before, this thing is pure magic. All you're going to do is type now, and what you're going to get from that is you're actually just going to get some data where it will show you it will give you an object that you can reference with the current time and reference it in not just that whole long string of time. So that's how I'm able to actually make it show 7/17/2022 instead of 2022-07-17T0012 blah blah blah. So that's all you need to configure there. And so now we just need to send the data where it needs to go. So the next brick I add is the add Google Sheet row, and all you have to do is select the spreadsheet. If you've never connected Google Sheets in here, you'll have to go through a few prompts to authorize Pixybrix to your Google account. But other than that, it should be good. Search for your sheet and make sure the tab name is set to relevant issues. Yours is probably, if you copied this, going to be called relevant tasks, don't edit. So just make sure that one is selected there. And then it's going to automatically pull in the header values on that tab. And that's why it's extremely important to not add anything above it. Don't edit anything in that sheet because we want it to look like this. And then we just need to map the data that we get from that form, from that input and from the parse date brick to this form submit to map out that row. So, and notice here's exactly how we reference anything from the form. We reference at form, so basically whatever was answered there, and then the field that we want. So we want the task, we want the goal, we want the notes. put it there, link, just like how I used input.title to default the text to the title of whatever page I was on. Now we just want input.url, which is another property up there. And then lastly, date, we're just going to reference that parse date object and get the local date. And that's again where all that is it's taking that long timestamp and putting it in this sort of format. All right, so we'll now have sent it to Google Sheets, and the next step is putting the data in Pixybrix database. And this is where I told you all I'd let you know, hey, this is probably not a necessary step. You can totally skip this. If you do not care about seeing this, then completely skip this part. But if you are interested in that, it's really not that hard to do. All you need to do is add the put data in Pixybrix database brick. Say that 5 times fast. And you're going to give it a key. And this is where I don't care what your key is. It just needs to match exactly whatever you have over here in your achievements in the sidebar panel one that you made. Whatever you have here in the key for get data from Pixybrix. If you called it poop, you need to call it poop. Whatever you called it. I called it most recent here, so that needs to match exactly. Because remember, we're basically saying in that other extension, we're saying, hey, go get the data you have for this thing. So now we're putting data to that. So it's really important to match. So I call it most recent. Again, you'll have to, pick the database here. And the next thing you want to change is a merge strategy. This is just a value we want to regularly rewrite. So it's always going to find something there, ideally, except for the first time it creates this. And then it's going to find something for name and date. We're okay with that. This is intentional. We want to replace it. So just select the drop down and make sure you have replace shown up there. I think it's actually the default already. Yeah. So you may not need to change anything there, but just make sure. And then we're going to specify some properties here. So we just want to pass it the name. And again, this is kind of like the form. It's just a simplified version. We're only passing the name and the date, parse date.local date. So all those things there, just copy and paste that. And that's going to now, when we submit the form, ship that to the most recent, literally the most recent key in our achievements database in Pixybrix, so that when that sidebar panel loads, it pulls that value from there. And then lastly, I just have some fun. I added the show confetti brick because that's what splashes the digital confetti across the screen, and I think that's fun. You don't have to configure anything there. And then lastly, add the show sidebar and set the panel heading to goals or whatever you called it when you created the panel over here, whatever that heading is. I think I actually have a screenshot explaining this here. Yeah, so whatever you called that there, that's what you're going to want to name it. Because basically what we're saying is, hey, you submitted this, you filled this out, great. Now go to that panel and show the dashboard, show the last task, and, show what tasks I can grab next. So that's it. That's it, folks. It is both that simple and that granular of a sort of process. There's a lot that goes into it, but it's pretty powerful if you think about it. What we've built is a whole system here for, from any page that I'm on, I can now quickly log a task. I can quickly say, hey, I just sent this team email. Hey, I just did this or that sort of thing. And we have an actual record that we can show. So when it comes time to talk to our manager or have a promotion or, any of those sort of things, we can say, hey, these are the goals we discussed me having for this quarter. I've done, 10 things related to this, 5 related to this. And what were those specific things? Oh, I, did this. And you can literally show specific things and links to them. So yeah, I hope this is really helpful for you. I hope it's also encouraging when you have tough days and you're like, man, I don't know how to do anything. Like, we all have those days. Don't worry. Just come over here and see all the cool things you've done and the progress you're making and working to your goals. So if you have any questions at all, like I said, I would love to help you with this. Please comment on this video below. I try to respond really, really quickly. And if I can't answer right away, I'll probably say something about I'm looking into it and try to get back. And the Pixybrix team is super, super active. They're so helpful. Anytime I've ever been working on something and been stuck, they're always ready to jump in and help. So make sure to join the community. And, if I can't help you, we'll find some other folks in there who can. So thanks for watching, and good luck tracking your career progress.